Hello, world. So, yesterday I did a live lecture in Norwegian about behavioral strategies or practical behavioral strategies and how your mind constructs sensory experiences to help you do certain things. Like, for example, motivation and how motivation is created inside your mind. For example, when if I ask a client what motivates you, and my client say my boss, then the boss of said person is something external outside of that person, which isn't actually the thing that's motivating the client, because her internal representation of what that boss means is actually the thing that motivates her. So I recorded the first hour of the lecture yesterday, and I uploaded it to my notebook LMAI, and I created a podcast of the lecture. And I figured, why not listen to the podcast together with you guys? And I'll stop the podcast from time to time and do some commentary. And yeah, let's. The episode is called "Your Mental Sequence Dictates Your Results." So it's basically about how you do things and when you do the things that you do that allows you into the right state of mind before you do things. So if you're an athlete, listen to this. If you are a leader, listen to this. If you are a person who would like to improve your life, listen to this. All right, here we go.
Welcome to today's deep dive. I actually want to start today by asking you to think about a very specific kind of person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so have you ever noticed how people who claim to be, just completely hopelessly unsure about themselves are actually, when you look really closely, incredibly sure about their uncertainty?
Oh, totally. They leave absolutely no room for doubt about their self-doubt.
Exactly.
It's actually a fascinating behavioral loop because they possess this capacity for absolute, unshakable certainty, right? But they're deploying it entirely to validate their own insecurities.
Right. They are applying this incredible superpower of absolute conviction in the exact wrong place. And that paradox, I think, is the perfect launch pad for what we are doing today.
So this is the first. I I like to ask my clients that come to me and they're like, Peter, I feel so uncertain about things, and I'm like, are you certain about that? And they're like, yes, I'm very very certain that I am uncertain. And I'm like, okay, nice to meet you, uncertain. I am Peter. And it's just, in order to have a very firm conviction about uncertainty, that means you have the ability to create certainty inside your mind. You're just using that ability of certainty at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's super fascinating how the mind works.
Yeah, it really sets the stage.
We are unpacking a genuinely eye-opening recording from a Norwegian seminar. It's basically a masterclass in the hidden architecture of human behavior, anxiety, and, well, motivation.
And the overarching mission of this session is to decode those internal mental strategies that we use every single day.
The things we do on autopilot.
Exactly. The premise is that if you are constantly anxious or, paralyzed by indecision, you aren't broken. You aren't fundamentally flawed. You are actually just executing a highly efficient, perfectly practiced recipe for a negative outcome.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if
Right.
we're talking about recipes, there is.
Okay, so this is another one of the foundational ideas from neurolinguistic programming, where you have all the resource you need in order to do whatever you need to do. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. You have the ability to think, you have the ability to speak, to use your sensory representational systems in your mind, and but sometimes you don't know when to execute the different states and when to execute the different sensory phenomenons inside your mind. And Yeah, let's continue the recording, and you can hear for yourself.
It's a concept from this recording that illustrates this perfectly. Let's call it the pizza principle.
Oh, I love this analogy.
It's so good. So imagine you decide to make a homemade pizza. You go to the store, you get all the right ingredients, the good stuff. But when you get home, instead of starting with the dough, you just dump a jar of tomato sauce directly onto your bare kitchen counter.
Which is a bold, if structurally unsound culinary choice.
Right, just a puddle of sauce. And then you throw some raw ground beef right into that puddle. You slap the raw pizza dough on top of that, and then, I don't know, sprinkle cheese over the crust.
That's delicious.
Yeah, right. You have all the correct high-quality ingredients for a pizza, but you do not have a pizza. You literally just have a horrific mess on your counter.
Because having the right elements in your life isn't enough to guarantee a good result.
No, not at all.
Neurologically speaking, execution order is everything. The sequence dictates the outcome, regardless of how good the individual ingredients actually are.
And the crazy part is people do this to their own minds every single day. Like, think about a typical morning routine.
Right, yeah.
Someone wakes up, sits on the edge of the bed, and does like 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation to set a positive intention for the day, which is a beautiful ingredient.
A great start.
But then the very next second, they pick up their phone and watch 10 minutes of horrific, anxiety-inducing true crime videos on social media.
And then by lunchtime, they're completely exhausted, complaining about how toxic the algorithm is, and wondering why their expensive meditation habit isn't working.
Yes.
They're baffled because they feel like they did the right thing. But placing a peaceful state of mind immediately adjacent to a highly distressing visual stimulus, it just entirely negates the benefit. It's a sequencing error.
The seminar brings up parenting, too, which...
All right, before we jump into the next step, I want to unpack the pizza analogy a little bit more, because in your life right now, I'm pretty sure that you have most of the ingredients is necessary in order to have a good life. You probably have a little bit of money, you have people around you, you have people, either you love some people or people love you. You might even have a job, you might have a place to live, you might have clothes, you might have food, you might have a lot of different ingredients, but the sequence that you are experiences, the sequence of which you are experiencing your life in might not match your internal representation of what a good life is supposed to be. For example, like if you're making a pizza, you have this quite obvious sequence of where to put the different ingredients, right? We all start with the dough, and then we put the sauce on, and then we put the meat, and then we put the cheese on top. But if you it doesn't matter what type of ingredients you have if you don't put it in the right sequence. So I want you to just begin to imagine how do you sequence your life? When do you do the things that you do? Because like I'm sure most people, they scroll on their phones, which is, it's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But as the podcast recording just mentioned, if you decide to scroll on your phone right after mindfulness meditation, that might negate the effects of the meditation. But if you scroll on the phone 3 hours after meditation, then the effects of it might not null each other out. So I want you to begin to think about sequencing order instead of the different elements of your life. Think about when you're doing the things you do instead of what you're actually doing.
Makes this so incredibly clear. Imagine trying to force a toddler to go to sleep before you feed them dinner.
Oh, a nightmare.
Right. You have the right elements for a healthy evening's sleep and food, but doing them in the wrong order practically guarantees a massive tantrum.
Exactly. You cannot outparent a bad sequence. And you can't out-willpower one either.
That's a huge point.
We tend to view our personal failures as like a lack of resources or a lack of discipline or just a lack of capability. We tell ourselves, I'm just not a motivated person, but it's rarely a capability issue.
So, if our daily routines are like a recipe, does that mean we often go out and buy the most expensive organic groceries, expensive mindfulness retreats, ice baths, $50 productivity journals, but we still completely ruin the dish because we just threw them all in the pan at the exact wrong time?
That is precisely what is happening. We are constantly trying to buy better ingredients when what we actually need is just a better chronological structure.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If the physical order of things matters that much for baking a pizza or managing a toddler, what actually happens in the brain when we drastically alter the sequence of our daily habits? Like, can we intentionally hack our brain chemistry just by shifting the timeline?
We absolutely can, and the physiological results can be profound. The coach running the seminar shared a deeply personal story about exactly this.
Yeah, this was intense.
It was. So they run a large online community.
It wasn't that intense. The AI is taking some creative liberties here. It wasn't that intense, and currently the community I run isn't that large either. It will become very, very large because you might want to join the community after watching this video. But for now, it's not that intense.
And one day they experienced this massive psychological trigger. A woman from the US simply asked to join the group. And for whatever reason, the coach's immediate internal reaction was this overwhelming feeling of, don't look at me.
Wow.
It triggered an intense wave of severe anxiety and actually brought them right to the edge of relapsing into old binge-eating behaviors.
Which is such a terrifying experience. You think you have a handle on your mental health, and suddenly this tsunami of dread just washes over you because of like one totally mundane email notification. But the pivot they make here is incredible. They realized they were just automatically running an old destructive recipe. So they researched the neuroscience behind what they called flow blockers.
And they decided to completely upend their morning sequence the very next day just to see what would happen. They instituted a rigid, non-negotiable new rule, getting out of bed within 90 seconds of waking up.
90 seconds? That's fast.
It is, and the neurological mechanics of this are fascinating. When you first wake up, your brain is transitioning out of the theta waves.
And theta waves are what? The sleep waves?
Sort of. They're slow frequencies associated with that drowsy, highly suggestible, dreamlike state. Your brain is trying to naturally transition from that into alpha waves, which are slightly faster.
I just have to give a shout out to Ryan Doris on that one. I was watching one of his videos called "How to Unlock Insane Focus on Command," and yeah, he's to me he's kind of a genius. He's working on researching the brain and how to boost performance and new goals in record time with achieving flow state. I highly recommend you checking that out.
And linked to relaxed alertness and calm focus.
Okay, so it's that delicate window where your brain is basically booting up its operating system for the day.
Precisely. It's the boot up sequence. And what happens when you linger in bed and immediately grab your smartphone?
Doom scrolling.
Yeah, the sudden influx of blue light, coupled with the rapid dopamine and cortisol spikes from reading emails or looking at social media, it violently yanks your brain out of that transition.
Oh,
It
waggle.
forces you to skip the calm alpha state entirely and throws you straight into high-frequency beta waves. You are immediately in a state of high alert and stress.
So the new sequence was designed to protect that boot up process. Wake up, out of bed in 90 seconds, zero phone usage, straight into a cold shower to naturally spike adrenaline without the digital stress.
And a cup of coffee.
Right, and then sitting down to work strictly from a physical to-do list that was created the night before. No checking inboxes, just straight into execution.
And the result was an immediate massive state of flow. Deep, sustained, effortless focus.
That's amazing.
But the brilliant realization here isn't just that the morning routine worked, it's that this highly productive, quote-unquote, good day contained the exact same macro elements as the anxious, bad day from earlier in the week.
Right, both days had the same stuff.
Exactly. Both days involved screen time. Both days had gaming, physical training, and work. But by simply rearranging the chronological order of those activities, they triggered a flow state instead of triggering an anxiety spiral.
There is a music analogy from the seminar that makes...
Before we go into the music analogy, I want you to just take a moment and think about this, because um, a normal day for a normal human being consists of pretty much the same things and the same elements every day. And the way you are able to interact with those elements, your own internal narrative and stories about those external things happening to you, are highly dependent on your mental state. And if your mental state is in a high level of stress, which you can control, if you, as we talk about in this podcast, if you avoid the endless doom scrolling right after waking up and get up instead, you avoid hijacking your own brain waves into a stress response, and you kind of, at least this is what I feel in myself, because now I've basically been in a flow state for the last almost 80-90 hours, where I'm cherishing the alpha waves in the morning, and it feels like I'm kind of just bringing those alpha waves with me throughout the day, which allows me a little bit more time to contemplate and reflect before I react or respond to something that is happening to me. It feels like I have more control of my own mind. And the next example is when we were talking about music, because I used to play bass guitar for many years, and if you have ever played music, a musical instrument before, you know that a note is a note, and a lot of notes together creates a song. But if those same notes are in a different sequence, it's no longer a song, it's a loud mess. So the sequence of which the notes are being played in is extremely, extremely important, because with a beautiful sequence, you can make beautiful music. But with the sequence out of order, it will just not make sense at all. And this is what human beings are doing all the time. We are living beautifully executed strategies of things we never asked for. And I think it's rooted in the fact that our mind is hardwired for feeling comfortable. It's hardwired for survival. So once upon a time in your life, somewhere along your growing up years, something you did one time in order to keep you safe, some kind of pattern you once had, is the same pattern that you today are fighting against as some kind of dragon that is messing up your own life or rhythms. I like to say that, yeah, I'll say that some other time. I just need you to know that there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain is working perfectly, and it's even programmed your own neurobiology to adhere to those perfectly played musical sequences in your mind. But you have never learned the skills and the tools to actually rearrange them in a better order. So let's continue with the podcast.
This click perfectly. Think about the song Flight of the Bumblebee, played on the bass guitar. It is an incredibly fast, notoriously difficult piece of music.
Very difficult.
But think about the individual notes on the sheet music. If you take all the exact same notes, but you play them in a completely random order, you aren't playing a masterpiece, you're just making chaotic noise.
That's exactly it. The individual notes are the ingredients of your day.
Yeah.
But intentionality is the sheet music.
Oh, I like that.
That's why having that pre-made to-do list written the night before is such a critical mechanism. It acts as a cognitive shield.
How so?
Well, when you wake up, you don't have to expend precious mental energy deciding which note to play first. The decision fatigue is entirely removed. Your brain already knows the sequence required to play the song.
Okay, so we've talked about how the physical sequence of our actions alters our day. But the material takes this a layer deeper, into a place that is almost uncomfortable to look at. The internal sequence.
Yes, the mental movies.
Right, the literal mental movies we project inside our own heads before an event even happens.
This is where we examine how we manufacture our own emotional realities. The coach recounts a period in their early 20s when they were frequently invited out to parties. Now, an invitation to a social gathering is, objectively, simply neutral data.
Right. It's just a text message.
But internally, they were instantly sequencing a tragic movie. The moment the invitation arrived, their brain hit play on a disaster film.
They imagine showing up to the party, immediately being laughed at, getting aggressively rejected at the door by a bouncer, and then having to walk home entirely alone in the dark, feeling worthless.
Yeah, so before we continue with the podcast, there was a period in my life where I experienced quite the abundance of social anxiety. So whenever people invited me to parties, I made up some kind of weird story in my mind about not actually being invited. Um, the most frequent internal movie that I made up was when people ask me, "Hey Peter, you want to go to the party?" I'm just imagining them not opening the door and being like, "Oh, you actually showed up. We wasn't serious. We didn't actually want you to come, you know." And so when I received a text message being like, "Hey, you want to come to the party?" my mind went into chaos mode. And with what I know now, I know that it was protection, trying to keep me safe. And intellectually, I'm like, keeping me safe for what? And so I was running these movies all the time in my head, trying to keep me safe, which also simultaneously kept me away from people. So it was safe inside my own little sphere of existence, but when I exited my own way of thinking, my own little cognitive box, that also opened up for vulnerability, which being vulnerable was very difficult. And yeah, it was a really difficult time, but now it feels like a resource knowing it's been there. But yeah, it's a part of life, man. Social anxiety. Let's continue with the um, if you have any questions about how to deal with that, you can drop a comment on YouTube and just ask the questions, and I might make a video on the topic. Um, but for now, let's continue with the podcast.
And importantly, the brain doesn't just play the nightmare. It actively contrasts it with a deeply comforting alternative movie.
Oh, the burger and Netflix movie?
Exactly. They would instantly imagine staying home alone in cozy sweatpants, eating a juicy, perfect burger, and having the entire Netflix catalog queued up.
I mean, a delicious burger in Netflix versus walking home in the dark crying. Nobody is choosing the party when you frame it like that.
No one would. But here's the biological trap. Over time, your nervous system actually automates this response. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Right.
If you run that negative movie enough times, your body stops distinguishing between the imagined threat and a real one. Your heart rate spikes, your palms sweat, and you react to a simple text message invitation with genuine physical fear, completely on autopilot.
And we label this social anxiety.
Exactly. And then the ego steps in to protect us from the realization that we are scaring ourselves. It justifies the avoidance by creating a false identity. You start telling yourself and others, oh, I'm just an introvert, I'm just a stay-at-home person, I don't like loud environments.
There is this great story in the source about a concept called Briggy Yoga, which
All right. Man, I feel like listening to this back and then discussing it. It has this therapeutic effect. It feels good, and it also feels weird. And it just imagine for a moment, like we get the text message, "Hey, you want to come to the party?" And immediately my mind starts racing with a lot of disaster movies. And then my mind helps me thinking like, well, how can I counter this disaster? Well, I'll make some good food at home. I'll do this. I'll do this. And it just hit me. I've never made this connection because I used to binge eat a lot. I used to overeat a lot, and it made me weigh almost 400 pounds, which is about 180 kilos. And it just hit me that the strategy I used to master my social anxiety, or to master not showing up at the parties without feeling guilty. I had to create this masterpiece of a story, and I used food as the kind of the opposite, the balance, the thing that I used to balance the scale. Wow, I've never thought about that before. Huh. All right, let's continue. Let's continue.
Translates to peer yoga. Someone invites the coach to do yoga outside on a public pier, and it's an instant rejection.
Oh, the internal movie for that one was hilarious.
It really was, because the internal movie immediately cast them as a sweaty, uncoordinated mess on a mat, surrounded by fit strangers, trying to do some weird pretzel pose, and accidentally farting loudly in public.
A highly deterrent sequence of visual images, to say the least.
Right. But they eventually forced themselves to go just to break the narrative, and, they went, they didn't fart, and they survived.
But wait, I have to push back slightly.
Okay, so this happened a couple of years ago, or maybe 6, 7 years ago, where a friend of mine calls me up and was like, "Hey, Peter, you wanna join yoga, my outdoor yoga class?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want to join your outdoor yoga class." And she's like, "Why not?" I'm like, "Because it's not for me." And she's like, "Have you ever tried?" And I'm like, "It's not for me. I'm I'm not a yoga person. It's not for me." And then she asks why, and I'm like, "Don't ask so many questions. It's not for me." And inside my mind, I keep playing all of these weird stories, farting in front of everybody, not being able to move properly, being completely exhausted and making a fool of myself. These are all the movies that I'm actually playing inside my mind. And I'm not actually responding to her request or asking me if I wanted to join the yoga class. I'm actually responding to all of my own internal movies, kind of making a premonition of how that yoga class is going to be. And then my body physiologically reacts to that mental movie instead of the actual objective reality of a yoga class. So I went to that yoga class, and it wasn't for me, but now I know. And without actually exposing myself to the experience, I unconsciously allow my own fear and my own boundaries to hinder my own growth. And if I do that, I am not taking accountability of my own life. Let's continue the podcast.
Slightly here. Is the implication that all social anxiety is literally just a bad internal movie we direct ourselves? Like it's entirely just in our heads?
It's a vital distinction to make. The claim is not that the feelings aren't real. The physical symptoms of anxiety are incredibly real biological events.
Okay, good. What is being pointed out is the brutal efficiency of the human nervous system. The brain consumes a massive amount of metabolic energy. To save fuel, it memorizes the sequence of your thoughts.
So it's basically taking a shortcut.
Exactly. If every time you think of a social event, you consciously imagine rejection, your brain eventually says, "I know where this is going. Let's skip the slow cognitive processing part and just trigger the adrenaline response right now."
Right.
You have literally programmed your nervous system to react to a threat that you yourself hallucinated.
Wow. We code our own autopilot, and then we feel like victims of the plane's trajectory.
That's a great way to put it.
And this internal movie programming completely derails interpersonal relationships, too. Like, think about the classic Friday night scenario with a married couple that they bring up.
This perfectly illustrates the collision of internal sequences. You have a husband who comes home on a Friday. On his evening commute, he is internally projecting a highly romantic movie.
Right, he's picturing walking in, pouring 2 glasses of expensive wine, dimming the lights, and having a deeply connected, intimate evening with his wife.
Meanwhile, the wife has been home all day managing screaming kids and a chaotic household. Her internal movie for Friday night is putting on baggy sweatpants, soaking her feet in a scalding hot bath, and experiencing total absolute silence for 2 hours.
So they are existing in the exact same physical house, but they are operating on completely incompatible internal sequences.
And when those sequences collide at the front door, conflict is inevitable. He feels rejected because she isn't matching his romantic movie. She feels pressured because he isn't respecting her exhaustion movie.
It's like two different movies playing on the same screen.
So, have you ever been in such a position or a situation where you have your own expectations of what is to be the content of a Friday afternoon or a Friday night, and then your partner has a different idea of what is to be the content of a Friday night? And I'm pretty sure a lot of people has experienced having different internal expectations, which is caused by the internal movies you have about your partner, or about things that happens around you, or about things that is happening at work. For example, when I work with teams, one of the primary aspects of conflict in teams is different expectations of how the work is supposed to be done. And it's not that they're like reading the instruction manual differently. They're reading the same words, all of them, but they all begin to interpret the meaning and the subtext and context of those words uniquely. And unless you have a manager or a leader, or even better, a coaching leader in that team who can mediate the different interpretations of the instructions, then conflict is almost inevitable, because people are incredibly bad at listening. People are really, really good at hearing things. And when you hear things, it just cross-checks and executes what's already in there. It goes directly into your own assumptions of what is true. But when you're listening, then you're going beyond your own expectations, you're going beyond your own assumptions, and you begin to ask out new questions. And when you're really listening, then you're also engaging in dialogue. And when you're engaging in dialogue, you have to be brave enough to put your own expectations and your own interpretations on pause. Because when you're engaging in dialogue, it could be that the other person knows better. It could be that the other person's perspectives are actually better for this context. And if you're just hearing the other person, you probably are not going to be able to understand their point of view properly. And when you're not understanding their point of view properly, over time, and it's happening again and again and again and again and again, you start shifting the conversation to some kind of identity level in your mind and being like, you don't understand me. I'm never being understood. I'm not being seen the way I want to be seen. And why is my voice so dark? You never see me. And that creates conflict. Okay, back to the podcast.
Exactly. Motivation, whether it's motivation for intimacy, for a career goal, or for fitness, isn't about the external objects. It's not about the wine or the footbath. It's entirely about the internal story you tell yourself about those objects.
So, if our brains are so incredibly efficient at running these movies, how is it actually programming us on a day-to-day basis? This seminar breaks it down by analyzing a few core mental strategies. For instance, think about the strategy of learning. Think about the difference between how kids and adults learn.
Children are taught using bright colors, highly engaging stories, varied textures, and large dynamic visuals. They absorb complex information at an astonishing rate.
They're like sponges.
But the moment we transition into adulthood, professional learning is delivered as dense black and white text on a glaring white page.
And the connection made here to the amygdala, the brain's primal fear center, is mind-blowing to me.
It really explains so much about corporate fatigue. In high-threat evolutionary survival situations, the brain's visual processing actually drops color to focus purely on stark contrast black and white, because that's the fastest way to detect movement and danger.
Wait, really?
Yes. So by presenting difficult adult learning materials in dense black and white formats, We are inadvertently mimicking a high-stress visual environment. We are forcing adults to learn in a format that the nervous system subconsciously associates with fear.
Wow. No wonder we read a page of a corporate manual 3 times and retain absolutely nothing. So if that's how we learn, how do we access what we've already learned? That brings us to the strategy of memory. There's a fascinating look at eye accessing cues here.
This draws from neurological behavioral models, specifically the idea that the optic nerve has direct physical pathways to different cognitive centers in the brain.
Okay, so where we look matters.
Exactly. Looking in specific directions physically engages different neural circuitry. For instance, looking up and to your left is strongly linked to accessing the brain's visual memory centers.
The application of this in a seminar is intense. The coach was working with a woman who had survived a highly manipulative, emotionally abusive relationship.
Yeah, a really tough situation.
The abuse had completely eroded her sense of identity. She literally could not remember the person she used to be before the trauma. And the coach simply asked her to hold her physical gaze up and to the left.
By physically directing her eyes to the quadrant associated with visual recall, he mechanically engaged the circuitry for past visual memory, completely bypassing the present emotional blockage.
And it worked instantly.
After holding that gaze for just a few moments, she burst into tears because she could suddenly vividly picture the vibrant, confident person she used to be. The memory wasn't deleted. She had just lost the physical strategy required to retrieve the file.
So this this is based on well, I learned it from neurolinguistic programming with Dr. Richard Bandler. And it's also something that is currently being done in clinical psychology in the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. It's called EMDR, where the purpose is kind of to change how memories are being stored in the brain and decreasing their emotional charge and reducing symptoms like flashbacks and anxiety. So just to you can try it. You can try it yourself at home. If you just keep your eyes to a specific point, for example, up here, and try to remember something. Try to remember something specific that you currently have forgotten, and if you put them up here, and try to construct new things and try to visualize and try to engage your own creativity and visualize something new for you. And just see how it feels different now when you are engaging your eyes in a different way. Okay, just try it. You're going to be surprised at how well it works.
If our physical gaze can unlock repressed memories, it really makes you wonder how broken our other mental systems are, especially how we evaluate risk. Look at the strategy of decision, the absolute irony of human decision-making.
Oh, the disproportionate allocation of cognitive load. We will stand in a grocery store aisle for 10 minutes, expending massive amounts of mental energy, agonizing over the nutritional labels of a $2 chocolate bar.
I do that all the time.
Right. But then we will sign our names on a multi-million-dollar mortgage, tying up our financial freedom for 30 years after doing almost zero internal mental processing.
We bypass the logic center entirely because the real estate agent made us feel a certain way.
Exactly. We use an incredibly complex, high-friction decision strategy for cheap candy and basically just close our eyes and jump for the biggest financial commitment of our lives.
It proves that we have the capability for rigorous analysis, but we deploy it completely arbitrarily. Which brings us to the strategy of reality. How do we determine what is genuinely us and what isn't?
There's an anecdote about the coach going on a luxury trip to Bangkok, completely paid for by their company. They're suddenly thrust into this incredible high-end lifestyle, flying.
The AI is taking liberties. Hello, dear IRS. The trip to Bangkok is completely paid for by me. Me, personally, me, not my company. The AI is taking liberties. Okay. But it speaks to the core idea of who are you really? Like, what in the entire concept of you, what is true for you? What is your reality? I remember when I grew up and people was like, we're not that kind of people. And I'm like, okay, that kind of people, what is that? What is that kind of people? What consists said kind of people? What are the elements of life within the boundaries of that kind of people. And this is what I experienced in Bangkok. I experienced a whole other level of things that I had never ever had in the scope of my kind of people. In the scope of me. Never ever had it. And I had to question myself, like, is this actually me? Is this something else? Is this my life? Is this my life? It's my life. It's now or never. It's you know, hear for yourself.
First class, staying in suites,
Living the dream.
but their initial internal response is complete psychological rejection.
Yeah.
The internal movie is screaming, "This isn't me! I am an imposter! I don't belong here!"
Because the new environment directly contradicted the historical data of their identity.
Exactly. But here is the key. Instead of retreating to what felt familiar, they allowed their internal movie to update. They consciously began to elevate their own internal standards to match this new external reality.
They bought new clothes, right?
Yes, updated their wardrobe, shifted how they spoke about themselves, and basically raised their expectations from life. They effectively overwrote their own truth.
So what does this all mean for us? I want you, listening right now, to really evaluate your boundaries. How do you know what your truth actually is? Is the limitation you're feeling in your career or your personal life an actual physical wall in the real world? Or is it just a sequence of thoughts you've repeated in your head so many times that you literally forgot you made it up?
The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard captured this perfectly when he said, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards."
That's a great quote.
And with that quote, I want to ask you, how do you know who you are? I know this is a deep, weird philosophical question, but how do you actually know who you are? Are you a construct of different stories that you have told yourself so many times that you begin to believe them, and your nervous system is beginning to react accordingly to those stories? Or could you be something else? When I work with clients and we do like inner child, the trauma stuff, and I ask them, I put them deep into a trance, we do hypnosis work, and then I ask them to, this is one of my favorite like metaphors in this type of work, where I ask them to go on a beach, walk on a beach, and they see a cage, and in that cage it's the 5 or 6 year old version of them. And throughout that kind of metaphoric story, they begin expressing emotions, and they feel like some of the shackles or some of the constrictions or the handcuffs are being let go when we open the door of that cage and let the child out. And that kind of begins the healing journey for them in those aspects. And they feel freer, more relieved, and more like themselves. Obviously, when there's not any more a part of you that is being locked away, it naturally feels better. But I just want to ask you, like, how do you know what is true? How do you know the things that who are you? Because in the words of Søren Kierkegaard, like, life can be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. That means, in the words of a software developer, if this phone is outdated, what do? You update the software. The phone is still the phone, but you update the software. And I am here to tell you, humans have operating systems. You have a software in your mind that you can update if you learn the right tools to actually do it. And I am teaching you those tools inside the Inner Architect community at school.com, and you will find the link in the description of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I have never ever tried to make content like this before, but if you like it, please drop a like and a follow, and let me know if this is the type of content you would like to see going on in the future, because I do lectures in Norwegian every week. And now that I have a fantastic tool to help me build podcasts, we can do this all the time. I just want to know, how did you like it? For me, it was fun. I hope you can I'd love this. This was super fun. And yeah, I think regardless if you like it or not, I'm gonna keep on doing that. I'm gonna keep on doing this. And okay, signing off, live, not live, but from Norway. Very good to see you again. This was me. This was me. Live, one take. I don't care. We don't cut here. We don't edit our videos. We just do. We just go live and we learn and do better and we grow and we develop, and that is what the inner architect community is all about. All right. See you in the next one.